In this video looking at Native Instruments Battery Sampler, we're going to load up a multi-output instance of the sampler, and as we'll see later on, that gives us the option of routing all of the various different sounds and effects out of Battery through different outputs in Logic's mixer using this plus sign. And if we were working in Ableton, we would see a similar process available to us if we've selected that multi-output version. So let's go into the sampler and load up a kit, and I'm just going to load up the first thing that I see in my factory library here. So as you can see, I'm in the library tab, kits, factory, and I'm going to load up this funk kit. And what we see in front of us are several different cells corresponding with keys on my keyboard, which I can trigger from my keyboard, and you'll also see for each cell we have the key range here. This is an editable field, as we'll see later on, but for the time being each of my cells is assigned to a note. Also, I have this icon enabled here, selection follows MIDI output. If that's not on and I trigger a key, you can see that the display here doesn't update to show me the sample that's just been triggered. So this is quite a useful thing to have on, so I can always see exactly what I'm looking at. So this is the first kit that we come to. If I wanted to load something else, let's say a pendulum kit for instance, if I just double click, I'm now looking at that pendulum kit, and there's a whole lot of really very good kits with some excellent sounds in here, quite a wide range of different types of sounds, from quite familiar things through to quite experimental things. And it's worth pointing out that although this is optimized to be a drum sampler, there's nothing preventing us from putting in all kinds of other sounds as well and taking advantage of all of the effects and modulation possibilities of the instrument that we'll look at in the second video. But for the time being, let's just assume that we want to make our own kit rather than use an existing kit that we find in our library here. This would be quite a simple process. If I go up to this tab and say File, New Kit, then you can see what I have here now is an empty grid. And the process of putting samples into the grid is as simple as dragging and dropping. Perhaps I might choose to browse the library of samples that comes with the instrument and put my own kit together in this way. What I also might want to do at this point is change the number of cells that I see in this grid or matrix in front of me. And this is also quite an easy thing to do. I could go to this tab here and cell matrix, and let's say I want to choose 4x4. 4x4 is quite a small kit, but let's say that I was working with Native Instruments Machine or an MPC control surface or something like that. Perhaps I would want to create a kit which corresponded with the drum pads that I have in front of me. If I was using an Ableton Push, for instance, then I would probably go for a larger grid size. But let's just say we'll create this relatively small kit out of a few samples that we find in front of us, and let's say we scroll down and we're looking for some kick drums. As you can see, there's an awful lot of samples in here. I could just choose to search, but for the time being, let's just assume that we have been auditioning some samples here and we've come up with the things that we want. The process of auditioning things is quite simple. So long as we have this icon enabled here, you'll see that as we click on any of the samples, then we hear the sound before loading it in. So this is taking quite a long time, so let's just say we are looking for a snare. That's going to take us straight to the various different snare samples, and if that's the kind of thing that we're looking for, we can just drag and drop. And the same process for a hi-hat, I think without a space. So as you can see, the process of creating kits is really quite easy. Having done this, let's assume that we're not entirely happy with that kit because it's a little bit soft and we're looking for something with a bit more punch. So let's say There we go, that has quite a bit more punch. Let's take that and drag it onto that cell, and as you can see, it's replaced the one that we had previously. If we now wanted to assign these sounds to various different outputs, that would also be very straightforward, assuming that we have created the additional outputs within our mixer. As you can see, I have additional outputs for battery here, auxiliary outputs as they're called in Logic. Then all I need to do is control click on any of these cells, or right click, and as you can see down the bottom I have options to select different outputs. So I might choose to leave my kick drum and the effects that we'll use later on out of my main stereo outputs, but the snare, perhaps that would have its own reverb, so I could put that out of output 3 and 4, and as you'll see in Logic's mixer, that's now coming out of the auxiliary output, and I would probably want to put a limiter on there to prevent that clipping. Same thing for hi-hat, assuming that I wanted to be able to EQ this or add some different effects. And again, a limiter would probably be a good idea here, or I could just adjust the output level. But as you see, I now have the beginnings of my own kit and my own mixer setup.